What's up? All right, we got some big Battlefield news to go over, and then gonna debate. What is up? All right, I want to go through this news pretty quickly if I can. Okay. What's up, Nevicon? What's up, Beyond? What's up, Barty? What's up, Zukos, Darth Lord, Borage? What's up, Attendrius? Doko. Hi, Enders, you nervous? Why the fuck would I be nervous? For what? Talking to somebody? What's up, Vance? What's up, Seaman? What's up, you and me? What's up, Coney? Game day? It's another day, dude. Just another day. Oh, it's born from the Coliseum shit. Dude, Carl, I knew Carl was making that video about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was waiting for it to come out. I knew the Call of Shame hit piece was about to drop. I couldn't wait for it. I couldn't wait for it. Oh my god. If YouTube is a legitimate website, Call of Shame's channel will be deleted within a month. I'm serious. Like... If YouTube is a legitimate website we should take seriously, Call of Shame's channel should be deleted, preferably within the week, at latest within the month. When are you moving to Windows 11? Don't worry about it, bro. I will handle all that. See his new community post? Of course not. I don't go to that stupid shitter's channel. I went to his channel yesterday to leave a comment on his community post saying, I said, what's wrong, buddy? Your whole channel's crumbling before your very eyes and you're getting exposed? What's wrong? That's what I said to him. It's the only thing I've ever said to him. But we're not not worried about that. All right, let's start going over news. We're going to talk to Allfather Media, who I just DM'd there. We have 6 Manhattan Bridge map, Conquest layout, Tokyo Game Show. All right, so this is the Manhattan Bridge map. It's a classic. This is just like a classic layout. I think Devastation was like this, right? Was Dawnbreaker like this? I can't remember. I haven't played Dawnbreaker in a long time. Yeah, exactly, Raptor. I don't know if there's any gameplay we're actually allowed to look at, but I mean, I assume. Single player campaign live showcase. Triple XP weekend is now live if you somehow haven't completed everything. Sneak peek of the Warsaw theme. Okay, exactly what we expect. New Sobek City Conquest layout. I don't really know the exact scale of this, but one thing that really jumps out to me immediately is both of these points on either side are super close to the uncap now. Like, it just looks like you're just going to be perma-fighting over C. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this layout. My gut instinct tells me this layout's a little questionable. Not sure how I like that. Is that Scout Heli? What are you talking about? What? What are you talking about, Scout Heli? Vehicle icons? It could be transport heli. It doesn't look like a little bird to me. It looks like a UH-60 or whatever it's called from 2042. It doesn't look like a little bird to me. All right, the big news today. According to Wall Street Journal, EA is closing in on a deal with a group of investors, including private equity firms Silver Lake and Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, to become a private company at roughly a $50 billion valuation. Since the Wall Street Journal's report broke, EA stock has reportedly jumped 15%. Investors could announce the deal as soon as next week. This is obviously huge. I'm not going to pretend like I actually know exactly what this means. If anyone has any like business insight on this shit, that would be awesome. This sounds like a gigantic deal, obviously. Not sure about it becoming a private company, but there's been commentary I've seen saying, oh, well, becoming a private company might make long-term decisions easier, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. But $50 bazillion deal. So will this mean EA will be under private ownership? I mean, to become a private company at a roughly $50 billion valuation. So tell the Saudis to remove the BR. You're just hating on the BR for no reason, bro. Saudis expect the best, so maybe it'll make them have good quality now. I don't know. I don't know about that. All the Saudi princes love COD, Halo, and Battlefield. They bought a whole team slot for COD and Halo. Dude, it'd be funny if what it took to get Battlefield competitive is fucking Saudi Arabia having some percentage of ownership over EA. Alright, we got some new pictures of Saints Quarter. Close combat map designed for fast-paced infantry combat. We've seen this before. Didn't we play this? We played this in the beta, didn't we? Yeah, we played this. Yeah, we know the gist of it. We didn't play this? Well, it looks damn similar to one of the maps. Hold on. Are you guys sure we didn't play this? It was King Battery. Well, the aesthetic is the identical, I have to say. I mean, with the way the map is, it's the second Gibraltar map, same assets. Okay, it's set in Gibraltar too. Okay, that would explain the similar aesthetic. Call of Duty vibes. Great, another alley map. If you exclude 2042, this might be the worst map lineup we've ever had. This one looks exactly like the one we played during the beta. Oh my fucking god. Like, yes, oh, Jesus Christ. You know what, dude? The Battlefield community sits here and begs and pleads for urban maps. Do you guys remember this? Do you guys remember when Battlefield players were begging for urban maps? I do vividly. And now that we have urban maps, here they are complaining about the urban maps. It's you can never win. There's no winning with any decision making when it comes to being a Battlefield developer, when it comes to maps specifically. You can deliver urban maps, you can deliver large maps, you can deliver small maps. No matter what decision you make, there's always going to be these people. It's just fucking depressing to even look at. Genuinely. Can't please anyone in the gamer community. Indeed. Indeed. The gamer community. Yeah. Even that's questionable. Is there a community? Haven Remastered. Haven Remastered, huh? Alright, so we should be having a debate here in about 15 minutes with Allfather Media. I'm aware, you know, maybe some of you don't know who he is, or most of you don't know who he is. He's basically just somebody that was in my replies on Twitter fucking constantly over that overblown movement bullshit. Which, by the way, I'm right. I don't care. I'm so right about the movement, I don't care. But anyway, he was just constantly in my replies during the Battlefield movement shit. And we're gonna debate him. He's basically my opposite. I expect massive disagreements across pretty much everything. We'll find some common ground. I fully expect to do that. And obviously, we're going to keep it civil, but I fully expect to vehemently disagree with him on most topics, if not everything. He hasn't messaged me back yet. So, I mean, I guess we'll just go over, like, just to give you an idea. Just to give you guys an idea. This is one of his tweets from yesterday, and I'm sorry, but, like, this is just... One of the arguments that Battlefield movement bros use is you just don't want cracked out movement because you can't handle it and you can't play aggressive skill issue. Nah, I can. They're just missing the point. I and many other people who would prefer more deliberate and authentic movement in Battlefield, like the steps the devs have taken with these nerfs, absolutely can play the game like it's a full arcade Twitch shooter if we want to. What? But we often don't want to. That's not what that's not what we want the franchise to cater to, or what we want it to be designed in mind with. So yeah, just to give you a taste of what I'm going to be dealing with here in about 15 minutes. Yeah, the we want is really interesting. The we want is going to be particularly, yeah. We're going to hash it out, though. And what, dude, one thing I'm doing this for is a lot of these bitch-ass pussies on Reddit that bitch and moan and cry and seethe and cope and weep, right? Talking shit about me behind my back and whatever, saying I could never be open to opposite opinions, whatever. The reason why I'm doing this is I seeked out somebody that is legit the opposite of me so I can throw this in their face. just to show them how wrong they really are. And by the way, if any of these people on Reddit that are bitching up a storm about me want to debate, I'm right here, by the way. I'm always right here. One thing you can never say about me is you can never say Ender's ducks anybody. I'm on Twitter calling out fucking everybody. Sergeant Danger Cow, haven't heard a peep from him. I am totally ready to debate that guy as well if he wants to, but it's one of those things where you can't get bring a horse to water and make it drink. You know what I mean? Like if I can't force people to engage in the conversation. I want to have the conversation. If they don't want to have the conversation, there's nothing I can do. There's just genuinely not a single thing that I can do. So Do you still do coaching for Battlefield? Yeah. Yes. The chat, the most recent person I did coaching for Battlefield on is Freethy. He wanted me to help like identify some habits in his gameplay. He felt he was indecisive in gameplay, and he wanted me to like take a look at it and dissect it and just help him out with some problem areas. Also his crosshair placement and all that sort of stuff. So I do still do Battlefield coaching. I'm probably going to disable the ability to sign up for it for at least 2 months, because with the Battlefield release, with BF6 coming out, I don't have time for any of that shit. I really don't. Like, I'll obviously reopen coaching at a more calm time period, somewhere after release, once the big hype winds down a little bit and it's not as crazy. So put get good in the coaching link. Oh yeah. Favorite movie and TV show? TV show, I have to go with The Sopranos. The Sopranos is just it's such a good show. It's maybe just like a boring, it's got to be The Sopranos or Breaking Bad. And those are boring choices, but they're also fucking excellent. Like, those shows are just great. They're just great. Like, have you watched The Wire? I have not watched The Wire, but my girlfriend wants to watch The Wire. So I will eventually watch it. Breaking Bad is slept on? Slept on? Well, I wouldn't say that. Breaking Bad is critically acclaimed, you know? Dexter, I've never watched Dexter. Have you watched Better Call Saul? I have watched Better Call Saul. Good as well. I'm gonna have to be honest, I really haven't watched a lot of these shows you guys are typing. I've watched Game of Thrones. Should have ended it after season 6. Just put us out of our misery. Just end it. Because holy fuck. The Game of Thrones thing was really... That was really a problem for me. That was a big problem. Did not like that. The last 2 seasons in particular. I've never seen. I have watched El Camino. I have. I don't know why I don't remember it. That was what happened with Jesse after that, right? Yeah. Fragrance are you wearing today? Guerlain en Sons Mythique. Guerlain Encens Mythique. It's an ambergris rose aldehyde sort of weird smelling fragrance. It's fucking awesome. Fucking insane is what it is. You watched Ozark? No. No, I have not. I wear Creed Aventus. Banger. Banger. It's a famous fragrance for a reason. What are your thoughts on the new drag to revive mechanic? Fine. I'm okay with that. It's gonna be used for trolling. But hopefully not to any, devastating effect. People keep saying fragrances that I've never heard of. Yeah, dude, listen. You don't even know an eighth of it. I'm not even gonna say half it. You don't know the eighth of it. There are fragrances that are so fucking obscure and weird, and you just never would ever. You would never know they exist, All right, we're about to start the debate. He just messaged me, so I'm gonna deafen up real quick. I'm gonna talk to him, and then we'll get it started. Okay, guys? So 1 second, I'll be muted and deafened, and then we'll talk about some stuff. Okay? Yes, chat. I know I'm muted. All right, so you ready? Cool. All right, let me set this up on my end and disable this. All right. So, chat, this is All Father. He will be my my debate partner today. So what we're gonna do is this is gonna be recorded live, and then I'll put up a YouTube video. I'll do a YouTube intro, and then we'll get into it. Okay.
Yep.
His camera quality is a little too high. Could you make your camera quality worse, please?
I unfortunately don't have a camera on my end.
Good. This is exactly what we want. Okay. So I'm gonna do the YouTube intro now, and then we'll get into it.
Sure.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Battlefield Podcast. In today's episode, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the recent movements, drama, everything that was going on Twitter and Reddit, and that whole situation. And people were telling me that I can't handle dissenting opinion, and I don't want to have a conversation. So what I did is I sought out somebody that essentially represents opposite viewpoints of mine, and we're going to have a debate about Battlefield and a bunch of separate aspects. I'm sure we'll touch on movement and perhaps some other aspects of the franchise, the direction it's going in, and I'll leave timestamps in the description so you guys understand what direction this podcast ended up going in. My debate partner today is Allfather Media, somebody that was in my replies a lot during the movement debate. He posted a video critiquing me on Reddit, and once I saw that, I was like, okay, we need to fucking we need to set this up immediately. So He did agree to it. So first off, credit to him. I've had a couple people that I've challenged to debates refuse to, or basically not even acknowledge that I exist. So kudos to Allfather immediately for actually accepting the conversation. So how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Yourself?
I'm doing very well. It's a little too hot for fall, you know. That's really. I know it's the end of summer, but the leaves are changing. It needs to get colder.
I just want to, obviously, like, people probably from your channel won't be familiar with me because my account is tiny. But after we kind of spoke a little bit about my initial video that I made about the whole topic, where I pretty much did single you out, even though there were a few people talking about movement and stuff, and I did make a video and a post kind of addressing the fact that I probably did twist some of your arguments around a little bit too much and put words in your mouth a little bit, and I do want to acknowledge that because I think it's important that we have an honest discussion about it. The debate in its entirety, I think, has been frustrating for everyone because there's people who want certain things and people who view Battlefield a certain way, and I've been kind of annoyed with both sides of the argument to some extent, a little bit, but we'll get into that. But also, thanks for having me on. I think it'll be good and constructive.
It will be good and constructive. This is gonna be fun. So again, thank you for coming on, and I suppose we'll just open this by saying how. Let's start out by saying what the first Battlefield we play was, and basically our experience with the franchise.
Sure. You want me to go first, or?
Yes, you can go first.
Okay. So I first started playing Battlefield, which was Bad Company 1, the original Bad Company, all the way back in the day. That was like my first exposure to the franchise. And it kind of like captured me immediately, like just the squad play dynamics, the teamwork. Obviously back then, I was much younger than I am now. I had more free time than I have now. Obviously, like now I'm what you would probably describe as like the typical battle dad. I've got 3 kids. I've got a job. I don't have that much time to sink into Battlefield anymore. As much as I wish I did, it's just not the case. But back in the day, Bad Company 1, Bad Company 2, Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, and so on, going into like 1 and 5 and even Hardline. You know, when I had more time, when those games came out, they were like my bread and butter. I just enjoyed what I personally always viewed as a more tactical, more slightly slower paced than the likes of Call of Duty. And a more emphasis on things like destruction, things like flanking, things like taking objectives. It always felt like there was more team play involved, whereas Call of Duty always felt like it was just every man for themselves, running around to get highest on the scoreboard kind of thing. So that's kind of my background in Battlefield. I played with like a couple of like little, very small time clans back in the day on Battlefield 3. And we had like squads where we had like you know, up to 16 of us all working together at a time, and that was really fun. And that kind of formed my basis on like my nostalgia of Battlefield, and where my viewpoints of it come from as being a team play based game. And yeah, that's basically led me up to now, where obviously I just play a couple of hours a night every other night or so.
Yeah. My experience with Battlefield is similar in some regards, but a lot different in some. I first started playing Battlefield when my dad bought an MSI laptop, and it happened to come with a copy of Battlefield 3. And at the time, I think I was in early teens, something like that, right at the release of Battlefield 3. And I think I was playing mostly console games, but I was starting to make the transition to PC. So I started to play Battlefield 3 right at the start of it, and I've never played a Battlefield game before that. And I never really paid attention to Battlefield games before that. Like, I was not heavily involved in gaming. I just sort of did it as something I did after school, as a lot of people do.
Yeah.
So when I started playing Battlefield, it was very different from anything that I've experienced before. There's obviously huge maps and vehicles and destruction. and it immediately interested me more than any other game that I've ever played. So I started trying to get better individually at it. I remember I started playing No Shark Canal's TDM a lot because I wanted to make sure that, like, on an individual basis, I grinded out just like gunfights and everything. And then I started to play the larger maps like Armored Kill, and that transitioned into Battlefield 4, where actually most of my gameplay was in vehicles like attack jets and stealth jets and attack helicopters, of course with infantry as well. And then that's just continued all the way up until when I sort of accidentally became a content creator right at the end of Battlefield 1, where I started streaming off a whim because Zariana Plays, who inspired me to start streaming, basically just said I should give it a shot, and then it's never stopped there. And then VIII came out in 2042. I started competing in small Battlefield tournaments that took place with my team, and we won a couple events, and now we're here 2 weeks before the release of Battlefield 6, and the tensions are higher than ever, and the implications are higher than ever, and there's a ton of tension in the air, and everyone has their own opinion and
for sure
idea of what direction the franchise should go in.
And you know what, like, just to kind of touch on that, like, with the whole direction the franchise can go in, the reason I find this debate almost kind of frustrating in a way is that, like, this feels like the first time in a long time where the Battlefield community should kind of be united in the idea of, like, Battlefield's coming in with a really big swing. Call of Duty is dividing a lot of people in terms of, like, its cosmetics and its direction as a franchise. And it feels like Battlefield fans could really secure a win for once. So to have a lot of these debates going on, it almost feels counterproductive to, like, community in a way.
It's
but at the same time, it is. But at the same time, it's like, it is important to have these discussions because, like, the developers are always looking and listening to, like, you know, forums and posts, and like, at the end of the day, the will of the community will, to some degree or another, shape the franchise one way or another. So it has to be done. But yeah, it's just kind of funny how I think everyone's just so amped up and excited that it's made everyone go a little bit crazy at the same time.
Yeah. And now we'll get into what the more specific details. The movement stuff. I think in particular the movement arguments are historically extremely frustrating in Battlefield because it's so easy to have what you're saying become misconstrued, and then there are vastly different opinions on direction and mechanics and how they should function. And there are almost like there isn't like one or two camps of thought. There's like 20.
Yeah.
There are people that are like, oh, I disagree with you on this one tiny thing. I disagree with you entirely. I want this removed, but not that. I want the complete opposite removed and that restored. It's just a complete fucking nightmare, to put it bluntly. It really is. You know, even if you try to make, I've attempted multiple times to even try to make, structured videos about my specific thoughts, and then they're still somehow misconstrued. It's very hard. Yeah. To
well, I mean, you were posting about, like, obviously the smoke grenade thing, like, the other day, and yes. And that was an area where I was like, immediately was like, no, yeah, he's got a point. Like, smoke is a useful tool for almost every class. And even though I come from the perspective of Battlefield is a team-based game and should lean towards always incorporating team mechanics and squad mechanics, I do agree with you that most players, most of the time, play on their own. That's just a fact. Like, if I'm jumping on after work of a night and my friend has gone to bed early because of whatever, we're not going to play together. So I would like to be able to cover myself with smoke if I need to. That's just how it is. Mm-hmm. So you're not always going to have a reliable squad member who you're speaking to for one reason or another. It's great when you do, but it's not always the case. So in that regard, it's like, yeah, certain things like that, we can agree on, and then the other things we'll disagree on, and that's just part of the fun.
We'll talk about squad play and team play elements a little bit later, so I want to go into the specifics of the movement debate. And I suppose I'll state my position as clearly as I possibly can. So I played the Battlefield 6 beta for somewhere between like 70 and 80 hours. And one of the things that I really pay attention to, specifically with Battlefield in mind, is once I play a beta or once I play a new Battlefield game in general, I'm heavily focusing on learning the mechanics of the game to figure out everything about it. Like, I want to know how the gunplay works. I want to know how the movement works. I want to know if anything's overpowered, what I can get away with, how viable is anything, what are the penalties, are there any workarounds, like, what can I do? Even down to, like, can I break certain elements of the movement? So maybe I can give better feedback or more specific thoughts on things. And my gameplay from the start of the BF6 beta to the end of the BF6 beta, if you were to compare full gameplays, they're vastly different, because I learned at the end of the BF6 beta, you can't get away with the things that I was attempting to get away with at the start. So I immediately started to utilize the mechanics more sparingly at the end of the beta, because I figured out, based on my experience with the game, the things that were available, and we'll go into the things that are available, were all very deliberately implemented to have a penalty associated with them. And the penalty is in multiple different aspects. So just as a really basic example, you cannot slide from a standstill in BF6, right? There is a period of time where you have to basically reach full sprint speed, then it allows you to slide. And that is a lot different from how it works compared to, say, BF5 or 2042, where you can take like 1 or 2 steps and then slide. So that is a difference in how just one aspect works mechanically compared to previous Battlefield games. And then there are multiple others. But ultimately, my thoughts about the movement coming from the beta was, I put a lot of experience in. I felt the penalties that were in place, whether it be sight sway, whether it be what I just mentioned with the having to reach a full sprint speed in order to perform an action, I felt that basically the penalties and everything that was designed was well balanced. I felt it was a good middle ground. I did not feel that I could spam anything. I tried to. I really tried to. The jumping was the closest thing you could spam.
Yeah, I saw some bad clips from like people abusing like multiple jumps in a row.
That was, I think that was having to do with a specific bug that I was not using. But the biggest thing I felt I could use multiple times in a row was jumping in basically dead CQC. We're talking like 0 to maybe 5 meter distance. Hip firing. So maybe I get 2 hip fire jumps in, and if I haven't killed that guy, I'm probably dead, you know?
Yeah.
So I didn't feel I could spam anything nearly as much as in 2042, which is good. So like in 2042, you can get away with hilarious things, like I'm sure you've seen. I might even do it after we're done with this conversation, where I grapple on McKay, send myself flying 60 meters across the map, and then jump 6 times in a row, land sliding, retain the momentum, and then, you can't do that. So then fast forward to the nerfs being announced. And because I felt the movement was in a really solid place, with the penalties and the way they were, the aim sway, everything, I didn't feel the nerfs were warranted. But one thing that's really important for me to really emphasize here, I'm not trying to say the nerfs are like the end of the world. What I am trying to say is, when you're dealing with the specific penalties that are implemented in Battlefield 6's movement system, it's a very slippery slope. Because the penalties, for instance, with the jumping and sliding, have to do with basically moving your sight and the wobble and the sway and everything. That is a delicate dance, because if they want to retain situational viability trying to use these movement mechanics in aggressive manner, they have to be very careful with any sort of nerfs they apply. Because it can become unviable and essentially useless as a mechanic very quickly. And that is why I was so concerned. I've seen it. I've seen worse things happen, decision-making wise, with previous Battlefield games when it comes to movement, with BF1 in particular. So that immediately sounded off alarm bells to me. And my whole goal is, and I'll say this final thing, and you can give your whole spiel on it. My whole goal is I just want to make sure that the movement in Battlefield 6 retains well-balanced design, and there is at least one viable, situational, aggressive movement option.
Right.
That's basically what I would like to see, and that's in line with the tradition of how Battlefield games are balanced, based off my experience.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, I get where I get where you're coming from. The areas that like kind of, so the main kind of clip. I have watched some of your other content, but the main kind of clip that got me a little bit riled up was the jump peeking clip. The infamous, I think, almost infamous jump peeking clip, where you were talking about the fact that obviously you can jump out of cover and then obviously try and basically still retain like a decent enough aim to do like a counter or to surprise someone, yada yada. So for me, things like that. So basically the best way to kind of describe my feelings on this is to kind of address the whole argument of people who are, I wouldn't say against movement, but have different feelings on movement, want Battlefield to be a milsim. I understand. I understand why you've become frustrated and probably use that terminology, because a lot of people have been saying, well, you should just go and play COD, and then that goes in, well, you should just go and play Armor, and that kind of snowballs. But I think there's a bit of disingenuousness on both sides when it comes to this, because nobody who's talking about movement in terms of being happy with the nerfs wants Battlefield to be a milsim. I think we just need to acknowledge that. Like, nobody's asking for super slow, super deliberate milsim style movement. Because at the end of the day, the way I and a lot of people view Battlefield is not necessarily as an arcade shooter. I personally describe it as a sandbox shooter primarily. That's its first and that's its main thing. So, as I said before, like, I view a lot of things coming from a perspective of like squad dynamics and immersion and authenticity. And that doesn't necessarily translate to realism always, because obviously you've still got things like Battlefield moments, like, you know, jumping out of a jet and like RPGing a jet out of midair. Like, we all accept and acknowledge that there's crazy things in Battlefield that aren't realistic. So we know it's not a milsim. No one's asking for a milsim. You know what I mean? I just want to get that kind of point out the way. But
I'll interject, nobody that's arguing for keeping movement viable wants it to be COD either. That's fair. Thing.
That's fair. Yeah, that's what I understand. I understand that as well. But then when it comes to like boots on the ground shooting and movement, so I'm trying to basically explain it in a way that when it comes to things like jump peeking, for example, if we're talking about like Battlefield being an authentic feeling shooter, and you're talking about like the fact that Battlefield 4, so, you know, when you jump and your weapon moves, obviously the bullets are still essentially traveling towards the center screen and the crosshair. Even though there's visual sway, you can still aim if you counter that with obviously where you're shooting. If you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yes. The point of aim is time to screen center, and the visual movement of the weapon on your screen is meant to make you forget where you're aiming. That is the way the penalty is set up in BF4. Now, there's a fundamental difference between that and the way it's set up in BF6 and BF5.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for you're much better at explaining the nitty-gritty details of this stuff than I am. So, yeah. So for me personally, when I'm looking at a game like Battlefield 6, and the developers are saying, okay, we're going to change the way the penalty works to be that if you jump and your gun moves slightly to the left, the bullets are traveling out the barrel of your gun. Now that to me is immersion and authenticity. That's readable, and that is a penalty for me that I can understand, because that is the way I expect a weapon to behave. Now, just because it wasn't that way in Battlefield 4, I don't think that necessarily means it should be something that's moved forward in the franchise, because it's okay for the developers to change how penalties work, especially if it does make it more immersive and readable. Nothing ever has to be 100% realistic, because like I said before, Battlefield's got crazy things, crazy physics, and, you know, absolutely absurd stuff. But when it comes to that sort of boots on the ground gameplay, I would prefer something that feels immersive and believable, and weapons to behave the way I expect them to behave. I just think that is a more enjoyable experience. So if
Don't you think it's down to you to learn how the game functions at a mechanical level if you're trying to play it?
Not if the developers are also making conscious decisions to make the game look more immersive and realistic in that sense. So for example, if you've put out a statement out there on that video saying, look, this is the way it worked in Battlefield 4, I think this was better. And then the overwhelming response in your comments and in your replies on Twitter from Battlefield players are, well, actually, no, because the way the developers are doing it in Battlefield 6 feels more authentic to us as Battlefield players. Because to us, Battlefield has always felt like a more realistic, like, not realistic, but more realistic than Call of Duty, more authentic feeling than Call of Duty, and less arcadey, even if it still does have arcadey elements. So the overwhelming response from the Battlefield community is actually, we prefer this change because it's in line with our vision for how we've always perceived Battlefield to be anyway.
The thing that I've noticed is a lot of people that say they immediately prefer the way Battlefield 6 does it, they can't sit down and explain to you how Battlefield 6 actually affects real gameplay and you having to utilize the movement. So I will explain the differences between the way Battlefield 4's penalty worked and how that affected gameplay, and the way Battlefield 6's penalty works and how that affected gameplay. I've had experience in both games. With Battlefield 4, the point of aim being tied to screen center is one of those things where it's not immediately noticeable to the player and can cause confusion, right? Mm-hmm. So that is where I think the disconnect lies with a lot of the Battlefield community. They see my sight is aiming over here. Why aren't my bullets going over there? Okay, so the compromise in BF6 is, and this was first done in BF5, is we're going to tie the point of aim, i.e. where your bullets are going, to your weapon's sight. Now, there's very huge differences when you do that. So in Battlefield 4, you acknowledge this. When your sight moves after landing a jump peak, your point of aim is not affected by the sight's movement, and that's a deliberate design decision. But in Battlefield 6, when your sight moves, whenever you jump or crouch or slide or land from a jump peak, whatever movement your sight is doing, that is actively affecting where you are aiming.
Right.
So that's the fundamental shift between the way these two penalties and these two systems actually work. But the difference in felt gameplay is, if a system like Battlefield 6's isn't properly balanced, it can very quickly get out of hand and make a lot of aggressive movements that may be very skillful and deliberate to implement in your gameplay. Essentially moot. You can't effectively utilize them outside of extreme CQC distance, and obviously I don't want, jump peaking to be viable out to 100 meters. But
yeah,
it's very delicate. The balance with that system, with the penalty and the point of aim being tied to sight, is a very delicate balance, and I just want it to be well balanced.
Okay, that's fair. I think everyone can agree they want the game to be well balanced. It's just how do they kind of go about that? And so for me, when you say aggressive gameplay, a lot of people, like, when they get into the debate about movement and people start saying, I don't want cracked out movement, I don't want movement exploits, I don't want jump peeking to be overly viable and things like that. The response that we often sometimes get, like players like myself and a lot of people on like Reddit and the Battlefield like comments and stuff, is that, well, you just want to sit in a corner with a bipod and just wait for people to run around corners. And that's not true. Like, I welcome good movement. Like, I like the fact that we can dive onto our back and jump through windows and roll and climb up slightly higher ledges than we could in Battlefield 4. And like, I like good movement, but I want the movement to facilitate certain things. So for me, aggressive movement would be being able to like use the slide to get into cover more effectively, being able to peek like quicker and more accurately, being able, like, I think to a certain degree, I don't even have a problem with like being able to hip fire shoot quite well when you're doing a vault. But if you're going to talk about like balance, for example, I think the way weapon configuration is applied should have an effect on that. So if you build your weapon to be better at close range and at hip fire, I think the game should accommodate that, in the sense that, let's say you have like a laser sight and a grip that massively increases hip fire effectiveness, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to then vault over a wall and you still want to be able to defend yourself in that aggressive movement, those features on your weapon should facilitate holding your weapon up more accurately when in that movement, compared to someone that's built their weapon for range. But that's because that's readable. So if the bullets are still going to come out the end of the gun in a more real, let's say a more realistic way, the way you build your weapon should facilitate that balance of, I've built my weapon for close range, aggressive movement, and I want the game to reflect that in terms of how my character actually aims and holds their gun in the middle of a movement. And at the same time,
it does actively.
The reason
the meta in the beta was you equip a laser sight and you jump peek corners to essentially skate the penalties within a 0 to, like, I'd say 10-meter distance. So equipping a laser in the beta and just equipping more aggressive attachments did actively facilitate more aggressive gameplay, and it did make the weapons more unruly and less viable at longer distances.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. Like, I'm sure we can agree that is obviously the way the game should be designed. But then in terms of, like, when talking about aggressive movement, so I personally think that if you've got, let's say you've got a scenario where two players are both approaching a corner, and one player is like jogging with their weapon like sort of in a ready position, and the other player jumps around the side of that corner. So for me, from my perspective, the player that is in a neutral or walking position should always have an advantage over someone that's trying to do a jumping maneuver, because it's almost impossible to aim accurately when you're in midair. And that's essentially all that like a lot of Battlefield players are saying, is that they don't want to be in a position where a player that's jumping through the air essentially has the same like amount of accuracy, or the game is catered towards like silly, what they view as essentially silly movement, because that's just not the way they perceive Battlefield to be. It should be about cover, it should be about flanking, it should be about positioning. And I've watched, and just to say before you like take over the point, I've watched your gameplay, and the main thing that you actually take advantage of is positioning. I'm not gonna it usually is getting a good flank and being able to mow down people who are unable to respond because you've done a good flank, and that's fine. That's good. That's what we want. But I think that's an area where a lot of people would actually agree with you. It's just that when it comes to like movement, I think most people want it to be in a situation where if you catch a person that's moving, you essentially should have an advantage over them in a neutral position. It doesn't necessarily mean you want to just camp behind the wall. It's just making that sort of movement more readable.
Okay. There was a lot to unpack there. I just want to... Where do I start?
Essentially, like, so if it makes it easier to kind of discuss the point, movement should cater towards defense rather than aggression generally, like getting to cover, to then
Okay, so we'll start with that.
counter.
So if you look at Battlefield, shooting back all the way back to BF3. So what is this? This is 14 or 15 years ago. There's always at least one viable aggressive movement option. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, for instance, if you're trying to jump peek somebody and they're in a good position, and let's say you both know where each other you both know each other's position. If I jump peek that person and he's in a good position and I kill him, that guy got outplayed.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So if you look at Battlefield 3, jump peeking was viable. However, if you were in a good position in Battlefield 3 and if you were aware of each other's position, most of the time the person jump peeking you is going to die before they hit the ground. Because the person in a good position that is aware of what's going to happen will simply kill the person that is willingly exposing themselves from their cover.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times this aggressive movement just doesn't even work if the player you're trying to kill,
if you're not catching people that you've got a good flank on, essentially.
If you don't time it well. So if you don't time the movement, if you don't time the aggressive movement well enough, you're going to die. And that's how Battlefield 6 worked. And just to cover your, you made a point about basically weapon position, if I understood it correctly. Your position was somebody jumping through the air should not be as accurate as somebody that has their weapon ready to fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
But where's the line? Because if somebody that has their weapon ready to fire loses to somebody that is taking all the risk and is not ready to fire for an extended period of time, did that person not just like completely lose that engagement?
Well, yeah, obviously, like I would agree that they did. I'm not saying that, because essentially what we're getting into here is like, obviously, like a player that is more skilled and more aggressive is going to beat someone in that scenario, and that just basically comes down to like aim. But I think
I want to say, you can finish your point, and then I want to say one thing.
So I'm basically just trying to like kind of word it in the way that makes sense, because if I basically, so the way that a lot of Battlefield players look at it is, yeah, okay, if someone is playing with like hyper aggressive movement and jumping through the air, you can say yes, that person did outplay the person that was in an advantageous position, right? And I understand what you're saying about like the fact that, okay, it shouldn't be balanced to the point that a person that's trying to be aggressive should be at a disadvantage, because that wouldn't be fair on an aggressive player, because that means a defensive player is always going to be an advantage, and that would encourage defensive play.
A lot of the time, a defensive player is going to be at a stark advantage, even if a person that's trying to utilize aggressive movement does it extremely well. I've played against some of the best Battlefield players in the world. When they try to jump peek me sometimes, like Focus or whoever my competitive teammates, we've run internal scrims. I'm playing against a bunch of giga sweats, right? That 5 KD, 6 KD, whatever it may be. Sometimes I'll be in a head glitch. They'll try to jump peek me. They don't even hit a bullet. And they might do everything right.
So I think the way that a lot of Battlefield players that aren't on the same, like, because essentially you're looking at like probably the top 10% of players who play hyper aggressively and use really good movement, right? But most players would be of the mindset of, okay, in two players in that situation, they want the game to be geared towards the idea of, rather than that player being encouraged to do something like a jump peek, why not throw a flash grenade and then play aggressively that way? Why not peek around the corner?
But I would like to get back to the core of this. So I want to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
What about Battlefield 6's movement is out of line with your view of what Battlefield should be? Like, what specific aspects, like whether it be the slide in specific design elements, like jump peak in specific design elements, like is there anything that in your view does not fit how Battlefield has been or should be in your opinion?
I think personally the nerfs, well, I don't personally describe them as nerfs, but just so everyone knows what we're talking about, because that's the way everyone's been describing it. The nerfs, personally, for me, I think are a step in a good direction for what the overall, like for what the community and myself have expressed an interest in, which is trying to move away from encouraging hyper-aggressive movement, in the sense that it should always be encouraged to use something that's considered more tactical or another type of gameplay mechanism to gain advantage in that situation. So I think that if you're in a situation where you know a player is a corner, the last thing you should want to do is do something like a jump peek. You should think,
okay,
I want to engage.
This isn't
just
how
one
Battlefield
second.
plays,
Just
though.
one second. I'll get to that because I do think that's worth addressing as well. So a player in that situation should think, I want to engage with these mechanics. I want to throw a grenade around that corner. I want to use C4 to get through the wall behind them. You know, I want to let my squad mates know that there's a guy around the corner that poses a threat. Whatever it might be, that essentially, like, cracked out movements, this should be essentially the last thing on people's mind in most situations. And if you are going to be in a situation where you have to basically go around that corner, cover and peeking and normal peeking should be encouraged more than something like aggressive jump peeking, in my opinion. Okay. And in a lot of people's opinions, because they want to move away from what they see as hyper-aggressive, unrealistic, unimmersive gameplay. Now, I know what you're going to say. That's historically not the way Battlefield has been, especially at high levels of gameplay. And I agree, and that's because a lot of players who have a lot of time to put into the game and are skilled at movement have found a way to exploit systems or exploit certain movement mechanics that might not necessarily have been intentional. And even if they were intentional by DICE, that doesn't necessarily matter in relation to Battlefield 6, because if the community are putting forward a sentiment of, well, this is the way we want the gameplay to be balanced and the way we want the game to be going forward, moving away from aggressive gameplay like the finals or Call of Duty, that's a good thing, because that means they're listening to overall community sentiment.
All right, so to address this, I need to back way up.
Okay.
So what is the main competitor to Battlefield?
Oh. Well, I mean, if you're looking at the side by side, then the obvious answer is Call of Duty.
Okay. So, and just this is going to take extrapolation. It's so with the main competitor being Call of Duty in mind, and with EA being a business whose goal is to make money in mind, you understand that they are at bare minimum going to design modern Battlefield games to be at least kind of similar to their largest competitor for crossover player-based purposes. They're not going to design something that is vastly different when they're competing in the same sort of FPS space. And this is very important to understand.
I think that's a good point, but I think I can address it. So, while they do occupy a space. Okay, if you were to put games on a spectrum, let's say you had Arma, Insurgency, Call of Duty, Battlefield. Call of Duty and Battlefield will occupy a similar place on that spectrum, right? They're not that far from each other.
They're about to occupy the exact same space, because EA is going for Warzone's neck.
That's a different Warzone is a different discussion, I think.
Yeah,
but I agree that Call of Duty and Battlefield are leaning towards the same side of the spectrum, but Battlefield obviously does lean a little bit more in towards squad play. It's not a milsim. No one's saying it's a milsim. No one wants it to be a milsim. Now, you're saying that EA is financially looking at Battlefield and wants it to compete with Call of Duty.
They want to make a bunch more money
gain the
from
trust of a
Battlefield.
lot of their players because a lot of people are moving away from Call of Duty for various reasons. But the problem is, if you start catering towards the Call of Duty mindset of gameplay, you are also alienating a lot of Battlefield players at the same time.
And
that...
you can finish this point, but
I would just... well, yeah, I mean, so essentially, if you just turn Battlefield into a clone of Call of Duty, you're eventually going to have the same problems that Call of Duty has.
Yeah,
okay, the reason the Battlefield... just one last thing. The reason the Battlefield players don't play Call of Duty is because they don't like cracked out movement in the first place. They're playing Battlefield to play Battlefield.
Okay, so no one's trying to make Battlefield COD, and I think we've established this. No one's trying to make Battlefield COD. There's always going to be that distinction, exactly. But I would vehemently disagree that the direction they're taking the franchise in is to turn it into Call of Duty. You know, like
I'm not saying they are turning it into Call of Duty. If anything, actually, I would say that they're very outspokenly going against a lot of what Call of Duty is doing, because a lot of people are moving away from Call of Duty because of various factors. But what I'm saying is that if you look at movement in a vacuum, right, there's a lot of people who play Call of Duty historically who've actually gotten tired of cracked out movement in Call of Duty and are moving to Battlefield because it's a more immersive, realistic experience, more authentic military experience, right? If you then start catering to cracked out movement in Battlefield, those exact same players that have moved away from Call of Duty are also going to get fed up with that.
All right, so I just need to address that. There has never been cracked out movement in Battlefield, like ever. It's like actually never happened. All the movement that I've ever experienced in Battlefield has been well within the confines of what we could expect a modern FPS game that is in the same realm of Call of Duty to have. And it's actually, I'd argue, consistently worse than a lot of options Call of Duty has had. Like, just for instance, I'll use Battlefield 6 as an example, and so if we compare specific elements of Battlefield 6's movement to specific elements of previous Battlefield games, a lot of previous Battlefield games actually have a lot more aggressive movement compared to BF6. So if we'll take the jump peak, for example. If you gave me an option to choose between all different Battlefield jump peaks, I would never choose the implementation of Battlefield 6, personally. If we're talking about what is objectively the most effective, the most aggressive implementation of a jump peak that has ever been seen in Battlefield, I would say the best, most aggressive Battlefield jump peak that I've ever personally experienced it's between Battlefield 2042 and Battlefield 4. So I would choose between those two. Then we look at other elements, like the sprint speed. Battlefield 6's sprint speed is the slowest ever. That's an objective fact. There's been multiple charts that state that, posted on Reddit. If we look at the way crouch spam works, crouch spam in Battlefield 6 compared to crouch spam in, let's say, Battlefield 3, 4, 5, Hardline, whatever it may be, is, again, I'd say probably the worst iteration of crouch spam in the entire Battlefield franchise. Because of the way the penalty is implemented, it actively makes your sights do this, basically. And then if you crouch spam to Battlefield 4, you will notice there's really barely any, if any, sight sway. You get to keep on target a lot easier, therefore making it more aggressive and more viable. The same could be said for Hardline. And if we look at the slide, I would take Battlefield 2042 slide over the way BF6 is implemented. I would absolutely take Battlefield 5 slide over the way 2042 and BF6's slide is implemented. So if you look at this conversation as a whole and you look at the specifics, I don't think there's any way you can say they're moving towards cracked out movement if all the movement options in comparison to previous titles are objectively worse. No, yeah,
I'm not saying they necessarily. I mean, the movement nerfs, as you've described them, are a clear point that they're not moving towards cracked out movements. I'm saying that's a good thing. I'm saying if you were to lean more in toward things they've done in the past, that I think it's. I'm essentially saying I think it's good that they're moving slightly away from that. So, to frame it as a question for you and for other people with like a similar mindset to yourself, you were talking about gameplay balance earlier, right?
Yeah.
And balance is something that affects everyone.
Mhm.
So with you and other perspectives, you and other people who share the perspectives of how movement should work, you've stated before that you would still play better than the majority of players, even with the toned down movement, and even if there was no movement exploits or easily exploitable movement.
Can I address this very quickly? Utilizing the movement mechanics the developers deliberately design in the game is not exploiting.
Okay, right.
That's not. Then you're not exploiting anything. You are actively participating in gameplay that makes complete sense and is allowed by the devs.
Okay, I won't use the term exploit then. Let's just say movement in
using aggressive movement.
Aggressive movement options. If they were to tone down some aggressive movement options, you would still perform better than 90% of Battlefield players in an average match. Yeah?
Of course, yeah. Because positioning and timing and all, there's a lot more.
Yep, 100% I agree. Those are all really important factors towards good gameplay, and I would 100% agree that is true. You probably would play a lot better than most people, even without certain movement additions that make you play even better. If that's the case, which, like I said, I believe it is, why do you still need that movement to be catered towards that playstyle if you don't need it to perform well?
It's not about catering towards...
And if it would make other players more immersed in the game and also make them feel like the game was slightly more balanced towards giving them a good experience.
So one thing... All right, I need to address a couple things here. And I want to address the immersion thing, and I want to address the playstyle catering thing. So I'll address the playstyle catering thing first, and chat, remind me to address the immersion thing, if you could, please. It isn't about having depth, learnable skills, right, like that are found in the movement. That doesn't cater towards a specific play style. In my experience, having depth is extremely important for just game design purposes as a whole. I'll use Battlefield 4 as an example. Battlefield 4 is a beauty of a game because it's easy to pick up, but it's hard to master. And that is one of the main reasons why that community has a flourishing, believe it or not, well, I won't say flourishing, a very dedicated competitive scene of players and a very dedicated community surrounding specific elements of the game, such as just basic vehicles. Like, there are communities of people that only play the attack jets and they 1v1 and they 2v2. There are communities of players that only play in jets and 1v1 and try to get better. That is a result of there being learnable depth, and that is a result of there being a reasonable skill ceiling in the game. Having depth and mechanics and things like movement that are well balanced but not crazy basically make sure your game isn't one-dimensional. You need to have something to learn in the game. You need to have just a little, I don't know what you would call it. There needs to be some sort of...
I get what you mean, and I can give a... This is going to sound a little bit off topic, but if you're familiar with this game, you'll probably understand why I get where you're coming from. Have you heard of a game called For Honor?
Yes.
Okay. For Honor has like an insanely high skill ceiling. There's a lot of depth to mechanics. I play For Honor. I'm decent at it. I'm not like the best player ever, but I can hold my own. And that game keeps people coming back consistently because there is an extremely high skill ceiling to push for. So I agree. I get that. I totally get where you're coming from in terms of having a high level of gameplay to attain and to try and aim for and to try and get better at. But what I'm saying is that you are quite fortunate in the sense that you've been able to dedicate a lot of your time to... And I don't know, I assume you're probably doing this like completely full time. That's a very fortunate position for you to be in. But for the vast majority of people playing now bear in mind, For Honor is a 4v4 game with a small player base. Battlefield is a 64 player game with a comparatively huge player base. And a lot of those people, I would argue that Battlefield is quite a casual shooter in a lot of ways. It's not.
It is.
It hasn't got hardcore like scenes in the way that Call of Duty has like esports and things like that. So is it necessarily a bad thing that Battlefield caters just a little bit more towards people that just want to jump in and have fun? Like you said with Battlefield 4, it's great that that game is easy to jump into and easy to master. But even without like certain move mechanics that cater towards gameplay, you would still perform better. But I would argue that without those mechanics, your other aspects of gameplay would improve even further. Things like positioning, like a lot of old school Battlefield players, like the battle dads as they often get called, they view skill in Battlefield not necessarily as being just about like aim and things like that. They view skill as knowing where to go, where to flank, how to work as a team most effectively, how to make the most out of a vehicle.
And There's lot of that more stuff they view is basic knowledge.
Yeah,
the pinnacle of skill they view, that is basic gameplay.
Not always. Not always. I disagree with that, because even if you look at like keeping it like say a transport heli fully operational for a long time without being shot down by working together as a squad. Now you could say that's basic gameplay, but I don't necessarily think it is, because a lot of people don't do it. So we
can agree on that. Nobody fucking does that.
Well, exactly. So that by definition means it's not basic, because it's quite rare to have a vehicle where a full squad are keeping it alive. And when that does happen, they dominate. Like if you have two people in an attack heli that are working together as a gunner and a pilot consistently, they will absolutely destroy an entire match. And that to me is a high level of skill and understanding of the game.
The attack heli team do?
So there's so much more to Battlefield than just movement mechanics in the shooter aspect of the game that comes down to game knowledge and skill.
It's an essential part of infantry gameplay. It's an essential part of really mastering Battlefield as a whole, understanding that the game isn't just positioning, it isn't just timing, it isn't just knowing where the preems are. If that were the case, I mean, you just see me almost never move in some locations, because if I have the priority over a extremely powerful head glitch and there's no movement in the game, I guess I'm never moving. Like I'm never going to make any sort of aggressive, deliberate effort to sort of outplay somebody with an aggressive movement mechanic. Instead, I'm just going to wait until it's clear and slowly move up. And that is what I think a lot of people want the reality of Battlefield to be. But
do you think that the way the developers now are implementing more tools, like for example, the sledgehammer? I don't know if you've seen that new gadget that Jack Frags posted, where it's like you can shoot it against the wall and then it flashes into. Yeah, you've seen it. Okay, cool. So that when I think about the idea of aggressive gameplay, for me that would be implementing more things that allow you to play aggressively in a tactical way, in a mechanical way that the game supports, rather than just it being based on movement. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
do you think that just because people have found ways to use movement in the past, a comparatively small amount of players, and I'm not going to disagree that they're not players, because they are, but do you think that should remain the design philosophy of the franchise if that's not what the vast majority of the player base wants?
Well, first of all, I have to address the vast majority of the player base wanting something is kind of irrelevant. I think that's literally a logical fallacy. Like, just because the majority of people want something doesn't mean they're necessarily correct or understand what they're talking about. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. Not that we shouldn't listen to the community on some certain aspects. Like, obviously, the movement bugs in the Battlefield 6 beta, like, fix those. Mm-hmm. Like, if the community wants the bugs fixed, listen to the community on that. Battlefield 1, I just have to go back to this. Battlefield 1 is such a good example of this. The community in Battlefield 1 wanted basically the slide to be nerfed, 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 nerfed. And then the Battlefield developers listened to them, and the second slide nerf basically removed the ability to use the slide aggressively in gameplay. Now, that had catastrophic gameplay implications. And a lot of people would disagree that the gameplay implications of nerfing the slide were catastrophic. They would argue it's actually better. But they don't understand that by nerfing the slide that heavily, you have just removed the only deliberate aggressive movement option in the entire game the developers designed the gameplay in mind with, and replaced it with nothing. So all that depth and all that mechanical skill and all that understanding of how to utilize something that aggressively in order to give yourself an advantage in gameplay is now removed because the community thought it would be a good idea, and the developers, because of pressure, I suppose, did it. Now, I would say that that is a mistake on the developer's part, because that exercises a misunderstanding in why the slide is in the game to begin with. Because if they understood why it was important, they would have never have done that.
Okay, but I think to a degree you've kind of just hit the nail on the head in an unintentional way, because you said that the vast majority of players obviously requested that the slide be changed. It was changed, and then a lot of people reacted positively, saying that's a thing.
It doesn't make it right, though. It doesn't.
Whoa. It was you and a small amount of players that used that tactic, saying that that's not good, that's bad. So you're saying a tiny majority of people telling majority of people that wrong makes you right?
It's not tiny, first of all. There were a lot of people that understood why the slide was important. And I would actually say it's basically people that have understanding of the game mechanics at a high level versus people that don't. That's what it really is at its core. And that's why I really wanted to have this conversation, because people view me as like wanting to cater the game to myself. But in reality, I want to make sure the game, Battlefield 6, simply has a layer of depth to it. And I don't want it to be BF1'd, where it only caters to one side of things. That is bad. Catering to one side of things only is not good. There needs to be...
But I feel like your own argument is kind of working against you here, because you're saying you don't want it to cater to one, whilst also saying it should cater to your side.
No. I'm saying they should understand why there needs to be some level of skill gap retained in gameplay. That isn't necessarily catering to my.
But there's always going to be a skill gap, no matter what. You said so yourself.
Because there's a skill gap in positioning, there's a skill gap in mechanics. Utilizing the mechanics of the game. That is also a skill gap. For instance, some helicopter pilots have learned how to fucking levitate outside of their helicopter based on the physics. That is something that is like, now people are obviously say, oh my god, what the hell is this? But that is something they've utilized in their gameplay. And to give a way simpler example of a skill gap, the way players utilize the basic movement mechanics in the game. Like, you can slide around all you want. If you're not utilizing it correctly, you're gonna die. You're doing it wrong. Like, even in BF5, where I'd argue the slide was at its peak, the good players weren't the ones that were spamming it. They would use it very deliberately, and they understood how they could implement it in their gameplay.
Well, just to clarify, I'm not against a slide being in Battlefield. Like I said before, I'm happy that there's more movement options in the game, like diving, sliding, jumping through windows, all that kind of stuff. I want to kind of dispel the idea that people who are debating against you on this whole movement topic don't want any movement at all. It's just they want movement to facilitate. Okay,
I've seen some shit, brother.
All right, some people probably do, but I think there's a bit of the waters have got a little bit muddied, where the idea that as soon as someone says, "I don't want jump peaking to be like super viable," they're immediately told to go and play armor, when that's not what they're saying. They're not saying they want Battlefield to be armor. They're saying, I want to be able to play aggressively without someone doing a 360-degree jump and still having the same kind of accuracy that I... You know what I mean?
If you die to somebody doing a 360-degree jump, you honestly just got bodied. And it should be put on TikTok. It should be put on TikTok. Like, holy fuck. If I 360 you in BF6...
No, I know.
With all the penalties.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But essentially, from their perspective, what they're arguing is that Call of Duty encourages that kind of nonsense gameplay, right? So if Battlefield doesn't make it possible to essentially do that. That is then catering towards the immersion that they're looking for in a shooter game, which it feels more authentic to them. Yeah, okay, I agree. If someone does jump in 360 you in Battlefield, okay, fair enough. You did just you lost. You know, there's no two ways around that. I agree, and it would be, especially in Battlefield 6 because it is so heavily nerfed into the ground. But by the same token, if something like jumping and shooting at the same time is so heavily nerfed in Battlefield 6, and you still manage to do it when everybody acknowledges that it's extremely difficult to do, then that's fine, because at that point, that is a clear skillish, like, that's a massive skill gap at that point.
That's what I'm saying, though. Like, that's what I'm trying to say. The Battlefield 6 jump peak, you had to implement it in your gameplay super well to make it work. Because not only did you have to account for the run-up distance, right? So you couldn't jump peak just from the start. You had to place it. You had to make sure you were 1v1. You had to make sure your positioning was good. You had to make sure your aim was good. Like, you had to understand there was a penalty in place where when you land, your aim is going to be swaying, so you have to pre-aim differently based on where you're expecting to pre-aim. So basically, the pre-aim was either, I think it was, you had to pre-aim farther to the left and down than you were initially anticipating. So if you get jump peaked with all these penalties, and the guy does it, gets in, gets out, clean kill on you, that is very, like, that took a lot of skill to implement. It did, because there are multiple tiny things that player did to make sure that that jump peak he just tried to do on you worked out in his favor. And he took all the risk. If I'm jump peeking this corner, I'm giving up cover, I'm dealing with all these penalties, and I have to hit the shots. Maybe I think it's a 1v1, and it's actually a 1v4. It's like, oh shit. Like, this is bad. Like, so there are multiple things you have to make sure of before you can even think of utilizing some of these movement options. And I'll do you one better. The jump slide is even more situational. So you can jump and then land into a slide while aiming down sights. That locks you in one direction for even longer than jump peeking. So you have to account for the distance you cover while you're locked in one direction. You have to make sure that when you land, your target is on your screen, and when you're sliding, you can kill that target in that distance. And then at the end of the slide, let's say you got that kill, you have to make sure you're close enough to cover in order to get out of the situation, to make sure that you just got that kill successfully. On top of dealing with the penalty again with the sway and everything, which they made worse in the new nerfs. So that's all I'm saying. Like, my point is, there are the penalties in place. I'm not
saying that any of these movement techniques don't take skill, because they do. Like, no, I don't think anyone's really arguing that. So
what's like, genuinely, like, let's get to the core of it.
No, yeah,
if you think the movement takes skill, what is the issue? Because
I still think that without that kind of movement and the game being catered towards those kind of movements, you're still at an advantage due to skill level.
It doesn't matter, though, because the Battlefield has always had this sort of stuff. Like, even if you look at older Battlefield games, there were stuff you could do. Like, you could dolphin dive, and I've seen, crouching, and even in BC2, you can even run fucking diagonally in BC2. God forbid that ever comes back. But you could do little jump things in BC2. Like, there's always going to be little elements of Battlefield gameplay that are like this, because, like you mentioned, Battlefield occupies that in-between space. It's not quite COD. It's not quite Arma, whatever you want to call it. It firmly occupies that middle, leaning more towards COD space. It does lean more towards COD.
Yeah. I'm going to make, yeah, to a degree. But, like, I'm going to take one of the specific movement options that you talked about before that were changed, and then apply that to what I think the actual key issue is for a lot of players. And I actually think we might agree on this. So let me explain. So earlier before, you said that you have to get up to like almost a full speed sprint before you can slide.
Yeah, and that takes distance. So
Now, I think personally that that is a good thing, because to me, in my brain, the way I think about it, that is essentially like inertia and physics. You shouldn't be able to just do a slide from an almost.
Then there's, I mean, I don't want to get into this, but then there's the debate as to whether or not
this isn't the part I think we're going to agree on. Let me get to that. I'm just using this as an example. I'm looking at that from like the way my brain works. When I play a game that I consider to be immersive or aiming towards immersion, and then that game says you can do a slide, but you have to be moving at speed to be able to do it, I'm thinking great, because that's the way I think a slide should work.
I'm fine with that.
Now, I think a lot of players who are against movement aren't necessarily against the idea of skilled movement. They just want it to look and feel realistic and authentic. Let me explain. So, when they see something happen like a jump peak in Battlefield, the problem that they're actually having isn't that the player is doing a skillful shot. It's that it looks janky and it's breaking their immersion in the game, right?
This is where the cherry picking comes in within the Battlefield community, though. They cherry pick what they want to be authentic or realistic, right? So a great example, they'll look at a random and say, oh my god, this is fucking sick. But if I, God forbid, jump on their screen, it's not immersive and authentic and realistic. It's like, okay, are we joking right now?
But I think if you isolated let's just say the idea of vaulting over a small wall in the game, right? If the game, you could give a Battlefield player with no in-depth knowledge of like the movement mechanics, right? You could say to them, right, you can jump over this wall and you're going to have a certain degree of accuracy when you shoot, and it's going to work like Battlefield, where your screen is pointing is where the accuracy comes in. Your weapon sway is what throws you off, and they're going to think that doesn't look realistic to me because the bullets aren't going where I expect them to go because of the gun. And then you could say, okay, you'll have the exact same level of accuracy, but your character model is going to hold their weapon up with one arm, like pinned under their arm, and steady the weapon as they're vaulting. And you'll be able to actually see where you're aiming effectively using the weapon and the trajectory of the barrel. And they'd be like, okay, I'm fine with that. Because the actual visual feedback of the game is saying the bullets are coming out of your weapon and will go where you expect them to go. That's readable for most players. I think that would actually be a better implementation of advanced movement than trying to nerf it in strange ways and ways that don't look authentic. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I would love to address the realism / like immersion stuff you've been talking about. But what's funny is, in my opinion, the way they're going about implementing the penalties in Battlefield 6, which a lot of people seem to support, I think they'll actually make it harder for the average player to try to do those movements. Because while it might be readable, I don't think
the average player is trying to do those movements most of the time.
They are. It's just they're not as good at implementing them in their gameplay. Like, I have seen, you know, just in 2042, for instance, people jump around and, you know, they slide and all that. And obviously, the more people try to push the boundaries of it, the more you're going to see it. But it also hinges on the viability of it. Which 2042, I don't want to talk about 2042 for too long, but you can get away with a lot in Battlefield 2042. That is like,
oh yeah,
there's barely anything holding you back in that game.
Well, I posted a video yesterday where I kind of wanted to prove a point that, like, don't get me wrong, it was nothing special, like nothing amazing, but it was aggressive movement incorporating slides, and it was basically just a post to say, like, this isn't necessarily how I to engage with Battlefield as a game. I prefer to play a little bit more methodically, but I can play 2042 like this. I can jump on Call of Duty and play with cracked out movement if I want to. I'm not the best, I'm not great at it, but I can do it. You know what I mean? It's how a lot of players want to engage with Battlefield rather than what Battlefield actually might be or is.
And
but I don't think it's a bad thing for the developers to say, we understand the community sentiment and we want to gear it towards that. I think that's a positive, personally.
I think it's a bad thing to listen to people that essentially don't want to learn the mechanics of the game.
But it's not that they don't want to learn mechanics of the game. They just don't want the mechanics to cater to what they see as unimmersive movement or unrealistic movement.
So let's talk about this immersive and realistic thing now. Okay, so where do I want to address this? So, okay, Battlefield is what fellow content creator Torbis would describe as an authentic leaning arcade shooter. That's what Battlefield is.
I like that description.
It is an authentic feeling Battlefield shooter. And what this means is Battlefield as a game rides the line and cherry picks certain elements that are supposed to be very, very true to form. For instance, vehicle models. Make those vehicles look as perfect to their real-life counterparts as possible. But the mechanics of the vehicle are completely unrealistic. That is what Battlefield does really well. The soldiers look authentic, and they might be wearing realistic uniforms, but the gameplay is not very realistic. The sound design is supposed to be immersive, and it's supposed to give you this sense of setting and grandeur, but you're shooting a weapon that you can weapon switch in 1 second to your pistol and then, like, you know, pull out a sledgehammer from your asshole. It's so the Battlefield gameplay, it's riding a very fine line, and it's supposed to cherry pick certain elements to make the game feel a certain way, with the gameplay feeling a different way. And this has been consistent across every Battlefield that I've ever played. It's one of the only games that I can really think of that successfully manages to do this. But the gameplay definitively is inauthentic.
Right. Well, wouldn't you agree then that if that's the case, which for the most part I actually agree with you, and that take on Battlefield, don't you think these movement changes or movement nerfs, as you want to describe them, are in the long run like pretty minuscule? Like there's such a small change that makes a big difference to a lot of players in terms of like their view of authenticity and immersion, that it's in the long run not going to make that much difference to a lot of players. Your argument would be it's not going to make that much difference to a lot of players because they're not taking advantage of movement anyway. So their nerfs shouldn't be in place. But a lot of people are arguing, well, not having that kind of movement makes me feel more immersed in the game because it's harder for a player to do something like a jump peek, and gives a player that's playing in a way that feels more methodical a greater advantage and feels more balanced towards them. I don't see how that's a bad thing.
So, okay, I think I said at the beginning of this that in the grand scheme of things, the movement nerfs, which they are nerfs, they've nerfed the effectiveness of these abilities, but in the grand scheme of things, the nerfs they've implemented are obviously going to be minuscule. However, they have the potential to be massive for gameplay. And that's, again, why I made such a fuss about it, because I have seen this firsthand work out in a very terrible way for gameplay as a whole overall. And it's a very slippery slope and a delicate situation whenever you are talking about tweaking the viability of the movement mechanics in a Battlefield game, because if you give the community an inch, they want a mile. And I've seen this over weeks and months and years. I've seen people say, you're jumping in a full kit of gear. They should add stamina and all this sort of stuff. And I understand stamina used to be a thing way back, but you give them an inch, they want a fucking mile with this stuff, man.
So you're saying it's a bad thing. It's a nerf. It's a nerf. But for who? For who specifically is it a nerf?
For anyone that wants to utilize the game and learn the gameplay mechanics of the game, and that can be.
But there's
0.5
plenty
KD
of mechanics
up to
learn.
8. Yes, but you want to have these are infantry mechanics though. Like infantry players make up a vast majority of the people that play Battlefield. Most people don't play in vehicles. And yes, there are multiple different ways to be skillful at infantry. However, it's very important to have the mechanics we're talking about when it comes to infantry are literally how you play the game. Like these are how you move. These are how you engage. These are how you get to cover. These are how you peek. These are how you play the game. So they are the most important mechanics.
For me, when you're looking at different ways you can play the game purely as infantry, you could have a list of 10 things, right, that are important to infantry gameplay, which is positioning, cover, flanking, accuracy. What these nerfs essentially do is remove maybe one component of all that.
It affects everything.
To slightly balance the game more towards the more casual player base.
No, okay, hold on. So
now, whoa. One more thing. If these gameplay nerfs cater more towards a casual player base, that is a larger group. So that is actually a good decision in terms of financial outlook for EA, because they're actually appealing to more people rather than the top 10% of players who are streamers and YouTubers, and I'm not holding that. Good for you. I'm glad that you've managed to make all this from streaming Battlefield and stuff. That's all well and good, but you don't represent the average player. And so if the gameplay is leaning more towards 10% of players are going to be super frustrated about not being able to learn these in-depth mechanics, but the vast majority of the player base are actually happy with the changes, that's a good thing overall for the health of the game. It's only a bad thing for you. And
so let me ask you this. Where is the line, though? Because at a certain point, the developers have to look at the feedback and go, this is a bunch of fucking bullshit, stop crying. Genuinely. Like, there's a certain point where it is objectively balanced. And anyone saying, I don't want to see this, I don't want to deal with this, is genuinely just, they have a moot point.
I mean, that conversation would be never ending. Like,
let me smash.
Because, you could pluck any aspect of Battlefield and, argue about where it's inevitably going to be the most balanced. I just personally think that taking away some of the more, extreme examples of advanced movement is healthy for the majority of players.
But there were no extreme examples of advanced movement in BF6. And I'm not talking about bugs. Delete the bugs. If we're looking at the base level.
Yeah, we can agree on that.
There's nothing extreme there. And it was balanced.
But it depends on your definition. It depends on your definition of extreme, though. So to a random Battlefield player that you could just pluck out of the player base, they might view a jump peak as being
Can I interject here very quickly?
Like an over-the-top movement mechanic for what they view Battlefield to play like.
But can I interject here? Just a little bit.
Yeah,
if a player,
it's your stream.
If a player is coming to the Battlefield franchise and they view a jump peak as something that, I'm sorry, what was the terminology you used? View something as
let's say advanced.
If a player is coming into Battlefield and they view a jump peak as something that is, it shouldn't be in the game, or it's too advanced, or it doesn't fit with Battlefield, I would argue that player actually doesn't have an understanding of what Battlefield has been for the better part of 20 years. So why should we cater to their poor understanding of the history of how the franchise plays?
Because I don't think the vast majority of players have been playing Battlefield the way you think they've been playing Battlefield for that time.
It's not my fault they don't utilize the mechanics.
I'm not saying it is, but let me just give you an example. Right, on one of your most recent videos, you took a video of Battlefield 2, I believe, which was like a movement tutorial, and you use that as an example. Look, this is the way Battlefield 2 has always been. But that was a video from like 6 to 8 years ago for a 20-year-old game. So that's 16 years of people being able to figure out what many people would consider movement exploits in a janky game. Doesn't necessarily correlate to how people were actually playing the game at the time based on the way the developers intended it to be played. Now, before you interject, I know that there's going to be a certain percentage of players who were probably playing like the year the game came out and were already figuring out certain types of movement and were in the top 10% of skillful players. I'm not saying they weren't, but the majority of players would have looked at the game as presented and thought this is supposed to play like an authentic, semi-realistic shooter, and that's the way we're going to engage with the game. And that's the reason a lot of players all the way up to today still feel that that's what Battlefield is, because they're not spending the time that you're spending.
It doesn't take any time to realize that. I don't think time is relevant to this. I don't think it takes any time to jump in Battlefield and have a good understanding of what this is supposed to be if you're trying to figure out how to play the game. Day one, I'm going to be trying to figure out all the sorts of movement, right? I'm going to figure out what's viable and all that sort of stuff.
That comes down to like a perspective of... That just comes down to your own personal perspective, though. You might do that in every single game you play, like not just Battlefield. Like that might be the way you play games and choose to engage with games, and that's fine. No one is holding that against you. I think that's a good thing. But there are, I think, probably a much larger pool of players who just want to jump in and have a good time based on the way the game is presented in the trailer, which is, this is an authentic military shooter. So I want to play it in a way that, in the way it's presented. Do you get what I mean? Like
no,
like
the trailer's fucking irrelevant to how the game plays.
No, I'm just using that as an example. Like, they're taking the game at face value, and a lot of people probably have been for a long time.
That is their fault. That is 100% their fault. If you're watching a trailer and thinking this is how the game's going to play, I don't even know what to tell you.
Right, okay, look, I use the term trailer just as taking the game at face value, but the point is, there are people who've been playing Battlefield even longer than me who disagree with your views on the way movement should be. So they're looking at it from the perspective of, this is what Battlefield has always been to me, because this is how I choose to engage with the game and the way that I've always felt the game was meant to be played.
So now, I play a certain way, and this is how it should be because I play this way.
But you're also making that argument?
No, I'm not. I'm not making that argument, because what I'm saying is I take each individual Battlefield game, I look at how the movement is, and I essentially decide, personal perspective, whatever, figure out if it's actually overpowered or if it's not overpowered. And I want to balance, I want the game's movement to be balanced on an individual game basis. We take a look at Battlefield 6's movement that the developers have designed the game in mind with, and the developers have decided they're going to have no tack sprint. The developers have decided they're bringing crouch sprinting back. The developers have decided there's going to be crouch spamming, jump peeking, and sliding. The developers have also decided that there are going to be penalties in place if you decide to use jumping, sliding, and crouching in an aggressive manner.
Okay.
I want that movement in a vacuum to be well balanced, and if the developers decide to basically try to tweak some things here and there, I may personally disagree with that tweak, whether or not I agreed, based on whether or not I agreed it was overpowered or needed the nerf. I lost my train of thought. Overpowered or needed nerf. Fucking Jesus Christ. It's just like this conversation's so complicated sometimes.
That's fine. I had a complete brain fart earlier. I know it happened.
I basically try to balance I try to think about the game's movement balance on an individual game basis, and I understand as a player, massive fundamental changes to the foundation of a movement system are exceptionally unlikely. So whatever's there, I want to argue about the very nitty-gritty tiny details of how you can use it and all that sort of stuff. And that's why I'm talking about the sway and all this sort of stuff.
Okay, but do you think the average player engages with the game in the way that you... Like, you've obviously got a very, like, for lack of a better terminology, like an almost OCD mindset about this, in the terms of, like, you kind of look at it and you're very, like, much into the nitty-gritty details of this is how this works and this is this way, very methodical. That's fine. But do you think the average player looks at the game from that mindset, or just wants to jump in and have a good...
Of course not. And this is, again, I mentioned this in BF4. The average player probably doesn't do that. But the beauty of Battlefield is it's easy to pick up, hard to master. And that applies to a lot of things in the game, including the movement. And that is the easy to learn, hard to master is what I want to retain. And I think it's essential to the gameplay and overall enjoyability and depth to the game. I think that is essential.
But if things like positioning, flanking, aiming, and the list goes on, being skillful at all those different aspects of infantry gameplay already give you a massive advantage over the average player, what is it specifically about, like, just those extra little things like jump peeking or certain types of sliding that are so important to you?
Okay, so
and I genuinely want to know.
I have a fantastic example of this. Okay, bear with me here. So Battlefield 1 pre-slide nerf. Okay, well, let me back up. Number one, fun. That's before anything. That's a valid answer. Number two, this is real experience. Battlefield 1 pre-slide nerf. Okay, so this is pre the second slide nerf that essentially removed the slide's viability as an aggressive movement option. In Battlefield 1 pre-slide nerf, because there was a very limited skill gap in the game on an individual player basis, you could have a lot more individual impact, and it felt like you essentially had more control of what your game outcome was as an individual player. Basically, it felt like you could outskill certain situations, you could outskill a bunch of things, you could really make a large impact. It felt like you had more of a chance to actually do something, right? And that now fast forward to the BF1, post second slide nerf, your experience as a player is essentially down to whether or not you get put on the correct team. Whereas that wasn't the case before, because even if you were on a team that's getting rolled in BF1, it's like, talk about just absolutely steamrolled. As an individual, you could still try to outplay, you could still try to really push the envelope and try to you could basically just impose your skill on the enemy team and try to make more of an impact for your team and yourself based on what was available to you as a player. And when they removed that, the feeling of just being sort of helpless is there, because positioning, timing, rotations, all the other things in infantry gameplay isn't enough.
Okay.
It's not enough.
But do you not think the fact that Battlefield, when it comes to infantry gameplay, is meant to be a boots-on-the-ground experience where you're playing as just one? Do you not think if the game is balanced to the point... Oh, sorry. So, do you think that then, in that case, that because Battlefield is a game about, when it, in regards to infantry gameplay, is a boots-on-the-ground experience where you're playing as just one soldier, do you think the game is balanced if one skilled player can turn the tide of the entire match?
No, I wasn't trying to make that point.
That's kind of what it sounded like.
I wasn't trying to make that point. Hold on. One skilled player can turn the tide of a match. That is something that really can happen. But I wasn't saying that should always be the case. I was making the point that on an individual basis, when you have even a little skill gap in movement or gameplay mechanics like that, it basically just allows you to utilize the gameplay mechanics effectively and skillfully to try to make more of an impact, you know, individually. Yeah. I'm not saying that it should like completely shift the whole experience of the entire server. What did you say?
That's kind of what you said though. Like so. No, I'm not necessarily saying you shouldn't feel like you can have an impact. You should, especially when it pertains to vehicles. That's a different conversation. Like a skilled vehicle player should be able to turn the tide of almost an entire match, especially if it's like a skilled squad using a vehicle to its full potential. But that's because vehicles are like gameplay changing mechanics, in my opinion. But to say that like one player using like a slide mechanic being able to like fundamentally change like the dynamics of a match, that seems a little bit overpowered in my opinion. Well, that doesn't.
Let me rephrase what I was saying, because this is not what I'm trying to say. I did a shit job explaining it because it's kind of hard to express.
I get what you're saying in the sense you should be able to feel like you're making an impact.
Post slide nerf in BF1, if you're on the wrong side of like team balance, it essentially just feels like you can't do anything. Because if you're getting steamrolled, if the server's super unbalanced, and obviously this can also be addressed with like team balance and everything, but if you're on the opposite side of things and there aren't any gameplay mechanics to utilize, if you can't jump peek, if you can't slide, if you can't have any sort of mechanical depth with the infantry gameplay, your experience, right, my experience, is now tied to what side of a team I'm put on. And if I get put on the team that's getting fucking rolled, I can no longer, like, basically have almost any fun, and I also cannot impact the outcome of the game in any measurable way. Now, previously, before the slide nerf in BF1, it didn't feel as helpless as it does now. Because I have a 6-something KD in BF1, even post-slide nerf. It still feels helpless to this day. If you're on the wrong team, good luck. Because you're constantly losing position. You're losing position, like, you're losing priority.
If you have a crap team, shouldn't that be the case that you do lose? if the team's playing badly and they're a bad team and they're getting steamrolled,
obviously, at a certain point, everything's completely out of your hands. Like, of course, yes, but what am I trying? It's so hard to convey what I'm trying to say here.
I do kind of like empathize with what you're saying, because I've had, it's not necessarily infantry gameplay, it's a little bit different, but I've had similar moments on like Battlefield 4 and even 2022 to a degree, where like we've been losing a match and then you could jump in a heli and you could get a really good gunner in your heli and you can change the tide of like the whole match, and that's a good feeling. But I don't think the mechanics of infantry gameplay should lean into like, okay, one skilled player is enough to... I know you're saying that's not essentially what you're saying. I get what you're saying, that you shouldn't feel helpless. But in most situations where like it's come down to a very close line, the thing that's always kind of saved it in the end has been that like squads pulling together, or people dropping health, people dropping ammo, like, you know, and actually starting to work together as a team, especially if you're on mic. If you're on mic with a couple of people and you say, look, or even in the chat, you know, look, jump in a gunner seat with me, do this with me, let's try and get this objective. That to me is fundamentally what can change the tide of a game. Whereas your kind of perspective from what you're saying here is like, I want the movement to be able to facilitate me using my individual player skill to
well, it's all cohesive, right? Like, you can make an impact individually, your squad can make an impact as a squad, right?
Yeah.
But the reason why BF1 right now feels so helpless as an individual, if you're basically on a team that's if you're on the losing side of things, is you realize that actually, no matter how well I position here, I can't really do anything. Because if my team is losing, we're losing position, we're losing priority, we're losing pressure, we're losing all this stuff. And if I just had a little bit more I could utilize in my gameplay, I could maybe win this 1v3. I could maybe win this moment that would get my team a back cap. I can maybe win this situation where I stop an enemy team that's flanking our gimme flag, right? And it just comes down to the fact that it isn't fun to have your experience dictated by your teammates. It's not.
Okay, but then counter to that, my view would then be, well, because the movement is not necessarily being catered toward your aggressive gameplay. Now, on the one hand, yeah, it's not. I understand that you want to. Everyone wants the game to be fun for them, but if a gameplay mechanic isn't catering to you to be able to win a 1v3, then I personally, in terms of Battlefield, think that is balanced, because it should be difficult to win a 1v3.
It's not necessarily. So let's
because
expand
it's a
on
squad,
the 1v3.
It's a squad-based game. You're supposed to stick with your squad. But
we'll talk about this in a second. So the 1v3, what I'm trying to say is, let's say BF1. We're talking about BF1 still in this particular thing. Let's say I need there's a 1v3. Obviously, I'm not going to slide in the open and take this 1v3 raw. That's fucking stupid. What I'm going to do is, if I have the situation, I'm likely going to be in a position where I can kill one, if not two of them from a position. And if I need to, I can, let's say they're in a ditch, and that, you know, those ditches where the ground is flat, but they're in a foxhole because of a bomb, right? But one of their teammates' bodies is about to be revived. Let's say in that 1v3, right? Two players are dead. He's about to revive one. I can now push in aggressively with the slide and win that 1v3 as a whole, because I used the movement mechanic to essentially put the cherry on top and make sure that I win that 1v3, you know? That's what I'm saying. Like, I need... the mechanics of the game should be viable if they're in the game. That's really what it ultimately boils down to here. Like, if you're going to put a slide in the game and have it be completely unviable, then I don't know. Just, you might as well remove it. And then, you said something about, I stopped you. What did you say? You said,
well, I've kind of lost my own train of thought.
What was I about to extrapolate on? Squad. Ah, the squad. Okay.
Yeah,
so you said something about the squad. I mean, I've played Battlefield for a long time. I can maybe count on two hands the amount of random squads that I felt were actually useful. And that just simply comes down to how players play Battlefield and the disconnect between how Battlefield actually plays and how people want it to play. You can never force a bunch of random people to come together in a squad and actually care about working together and successfully implement all these sort of teamwork elements and healing and smoking and flanking and backcapping and working together. It's very unlikely a bunch of random people come together and do that.
To a degree, but... Well, yeah, okay. But I don't even think you need a squad to do that. I think two players can do that. Like, I've had experiences playing... And this isn't like a coordinated effort to jump on this. I've literally had experiences where I've jumped on of an evening once the kids are in bed. I've gone in a squad with a random player. We've pushed an objective. We've spoken on like the text chat. And then we just start working together. And that, for me, is the core of Field's experience.
Define working together.
Like planning and coordinating to attack specific objectives together, and like dropping, like asking for heals, like listening to each other's requests.
By typing.
No, not necessarily by typing, but like a lot of times, like it genuinely just kind of falls into place. You will get people that are willing to work together based on like squad commands, and I'm not saying it always. I agree that most of the time people are playing on their own and don't necessarily take full advantage of of working as a team. But it does happen. Like, it's not unheard of. Like I say, I've had plenty of matches where, you know, at the end of the match, I've added someone as a friend because we've just dynamically played so well off each other. You know what I mean? Like, that happens. And that for me is what actually makes Battlefield special. You don't get that in Call of Duty, really, because everyone is kind of just running around lone wolfing it for the most part.
Everyone is in Battlefield too.
Sorry, go on.
The vast majority of people that play Battlefield play solo, and they don't play as a team. I don't even think you can argue against that. I think that is actually just fact. Like, based on my experience in Battlefield, based on everything that I've ever seen, most people play solo, and most people do not play as a team. And funny, you mentioned the attack helicopter. When real teamwork actually happens in Battlefield servers, suddenly everyone's complaining. That's one of the funniest things I've noticed across my experience in Battlefield. If I get a squad of infantry players together and we actually work as a team, that whole server is fucked. I swear to you. I swear, dude.
I don't doubt it, but like, I don't know if I actually do agree with you on that, because even on a random night that I can jump in and play Battlefield, like, when maybe it's just the different servers you get into, like, I've had plenty of matches where people are talking in the voice chat at the end of the game and they're saying, like, do this, can you take out the AAs? This AA is really bothering me. Like, people do want, I think the desire is there for people to want to work as a team, because fundamentally they understand that that's what Battlefield is meant to be. I'm not necessarily saying people do play like that all the time. I'm saying most people aren't playing on their own, but there's definitely a lot of players out there that know that the best way to take advantage of the game is to work as a team, even to small degrees of, like,
and I've seen
can someone take out the AA? Can someone do this? Can someone help me cap this objective? Blah, 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 blah.
Just the other day, I mean, this might be yesterday, somebody typed in chat and said, on the last sector of Iwo Jima, there's a helicopter up. I switched to list and I killed the helicopter. You know?
There you go.
But and the majority of players wouldn't even notice that happened. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. And I don't mean this as an insult. Don't take this the wrong way. I feel like if you personally are saying, I don't see that much teamwork in Battlefield, that's not my experience, I feel like that might potentially also be a reflection on you not engaging as a team player.
Dude, like, we can look at the statistics, because this is...
I mean, like, all I'm saying is that if that's your experience on a day-to-day basis, you stream Battlefield every day. Every day. If your experience is, I don't feel like people play as a team, that might reflect on the fact that, are you actively trying to make people work as a team? Are you typing in the chat, jump in the chopper with me, jump in the tank with me, help me capture this objective?
No, because I have no confidence in that. I'm to be honest.
That's a jaded viewpoint, in my opinion. For me, it's always a case of, like, if I do jump on and I see a decent squad, like, if my squad are dropping down heals and ammo, like, I'll just make sure I'm thanking them when they revive me. Even little things like that, it encourages people to stick together. I do see it happen. Like, it's all anecdotal at the end of the day.
I think the way I play the game is I acknowledge that Battlefield has a lot of little roles that you can fill to help facilitate the same goal, right? Like, just as an example, I've been recently getting in tanks more often. I've noticed blueberries coming to repair me. Good. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Like, that is actually what they're supposed to be doing. But the way that I play my game, I'm there to fill the role of the guy that's in the server that's straight up trying to kill each and every single one of the enemy team. And I'm running at you, full aggression. I'm trying to get as many kills as possible on and around the objective. And that's my play style. And it's a very effective play style.
And of course.
It doesn't necessarily... I revive my team, I revive my team. I play Falc. I throw a resupply into crowds of people. And people that watch my stream, if you pay attention to where I try to throw the ammo box, I try to throw it into crowds of people. But in terms of whether or not I really actively try to facilitate teamwork, I don't type in the chat and I don't say, guys, come over here, do this. Because the reality is I don't necessarily feel that anyone is really going to do anything that I type.
Okay.
And it's sad
I can see people in your chat saying like, I can see people in the I'm looking at the YouTube chat, so like I can see people saying, "Oh, this guy is like insane for thinking that actually work together in this game." And for me, it's like I think a lot of people then are not actively choosing to help out their team and actually like reap the benefit. Not how I'm not saying you're not helping out your team by pushing objectives and getting kills. You are, but I'm saying that if I jump in a helicopter, like a transport heli that someone else is flying, I will actively try to keep that heli in the air with heals. Like, I won't jump out and immediately try and fight. I will think there's value in this vehicle. Like, so, you know, if I generally tend to see is the more I actively engage with being a team player, the more other people then slowly start to come around to doing the same thing. And it's a gradual process, especially if you play in a persistent, and this might actually be where we have like different experiences, is that I won't always matchmake. I do play on persistent servers. So you will get a lot of people who are sitting in the same server together for a long period of time across 2, 3, 4 matches.
Those players, in my experience, are more generally involved in the franchise.
Exactly.
So
exactly. So it is anecdotal in that if you're playing matchmaking and just jumping into a random match, of course you're not going to see the same level of like camaraderie and team play that you'll see in a persistent server.
But unfortunately, that is sort of the modern reality of Battlefield. That is what Battlefield is moving towards, the matchmaking thing. So this is more.
It's a different conversation.
Will come. Yeah, this is
It's a different conversation, but I think that's why our perspectives are so different. I think a lot of the people in your chat right now who are listening to me waffle on about this are probably thinking this guy's insane, because they probably do play a lot of just matchmaking rounds where nobody's working together. And I play on persistent servers where people actively are trying to work together.
So define work together. Is working together, you guys have a plan, we're going over here, we're doing this, is that teamwork? Yeah. Or is the basic action of resupplying or healing or reviving, is that what you're talking about?
It can vary. Like, sometimes it will just be a case of I'm jumping on and I'll just make sure that it's dropped when it needs to be dropped. Sometimes I'll jump on and I'll have a little bit more, play a few rounds and stay in with a group of people on the server for like across multiple matches, and I'll get talking to them and then they'll respond and like they will actively work together. Every now and again, if we get 10 mics on, people will actually talk. If you're willing to talk to them, they'll talk to you, and you can get some good moments. I'm not saying
maybe I will try this, but I have to be honest. To support a player like me is difficult. It is.
Yeah.
Because you kind of have to be a very good infantry player in order to keep up with supporting someone that plays like me. Because you have to be on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
You have to be in the same wavelength. I move quickly. The plan changes in a split second. Okay, this position was good. Now it's not. I need to go over there. Need to go over here. Boom, done, everything. So it's honestly kind of difficult to find. Well, not kind of difficult. Almost unheard of to find random players in Battlefield matchmaking that can actually actively survive and help support what I am trying to do, which is a lot of the time flanking, very fast repositioning, split-second decision-making, actively running in the point, jumping, sliding, all this sort of stuff, right? I'm trying to do all this shit, and it can be difficult. Like, I need like a competitive level player. Like, we're talking...
Yeah. I think this actually is a good indicator of probably why we have these different opinions on movement in the first place, because fundamentally playing two different types of servers. Like, if you're jumping into matchmaking servers and just wanting to dominate objectives and get loads of kills, which is fine, and I'm jumping into a match with the goal of I want to get some squad gameplay going, then we're fundamentally going to have different ideas how we want to play and how we want to engage with the game.
This is an example of we're two different players that fill two different roles in Battlefield gameplay. This is what this is.
Yeah.
Like I join the game. If I join your squad, I am immediately, I spawn on the flag, I go where the front line is, and I try to kill everyone. I go, I die, I respawn, I flank, I try to get the flank. Okay, that flank didn't work, but it was close. Okay, the flank was close, retry that flank. I get it this time. Then I basically just hope and pray that some of my squad mates notice when they die that I'm behind everybody, if I do get the flank. And then if they spawn on me, that's great. But was I specifically going for the flank to get spawns? Sometimes. Sometimes I hope my team spawns on me, but mainly I go for the flank in the hopes that I can get behind the front line so I can help my front line push up and take it, right? Like that's just an extrapolation on maybe one element of how I would try to approach a certain situation. But another funny part is, and I I have a clip that actually shows this pretty well. Sometimes you can kill the whole front line and your team doesn't move up.
Yeah.
And then you lose
don't
that
get me
front
wrong,
line.
like I've had like equal frustrations on like persistent servers where like generally I'm a decent heli player. Like I can do a decent job in a heli, and I especially like to use a transport heli. I don't know why, I've just got like an affinity for it. And I can be in like, I get the understanding of like, even when you have like decent team play dynamics, I could have a full transport heli, do an insane like flight round, like dodge the AA, get round a really good position and fly over an objective, and then nobody jumps out onto the objective. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, everyone get out. I'm here to help you cap the objective, you know?
Once in a blue moon, I will do the same thing you do. I will try to keep the transport helicopter. And chat, this is very rare. You've seen it maybe 10 or 12 times. Maybe, and I don't want to say that little. 15 or 20 times, maybe more. I will fly the transport heli, and I will occasionally actually take it seriously, and I'll try to keep it up. And maybe there's repair people, and I'll fly over points, and I'll try to drop people behind points. And the success of that kind of depends on the skill level of the people you're dropping off onto the point, because if they die immediately, or if they don't jump out in their correct position, it's like, okay, well, fuck.
I just want to address one of the people in your YouTube chat, Kenshin, saying, "Oh, this guy plays in the transport heli because it's the lowest skill vehicle in the game." I just want to address that I'm not playing the game for the sake of like skill. I'm playing to enjoy it. I enjoy the teamwork dynamic of playing in a transport heli because that's what Battlefield means to me. Is like, I enjoy dropping a team off for an objective and knowing that objective gets capped, and then like running around the map doing that kind of thing. I dislike the kind of obnoxious attitude some people have towards like, oh, that's low skill gameplay. Like, if you think like a good transport heli run is bad Battlefield gameplay, I don't even think you enjoy Battlefield at that point. Like, why would you be against somebody enjoying transport heli gameplay? That's insane to me, because Battlefield encompasses all these different things for a reason. Like, I fully 100% acknowledge that your moment-to-moment boots-on-the-ground gameplay is, like, insane. Like, way, 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 way better than I could hope to be with the... You know, that's fine. But I can get equal enjoyment in flying a vehicle or doing something squad-wise. You know what I mean? And I think that's fine.
Fine, fly your helicopter, and it's fine.
That's it. Yeah, like it's a different topic. Like, we're moving off the topic of like movement specifically, but it just annoys me a little bit when people are like, "Oh, you know, you're doing this because it's like it's easy," and it's like, no, I'm doing it because I'm in Battlefield that way. What's the issue? And it's the same people who would then complain that there's no teamwork in Battlefield. And they're like, oh, there's no teamwork in Battlefield. It's like, I'm coming onto a stream and telling you that there are people that enjoy teamwork and want to engage in teamwork. And then you're trying to put that person down, and then you're wondering why there's no teamwork.
I say there's no teamwork most of the time, because I've experienced like really high level Battlefield teamwork, and maybe I'm just used to that. We're like, listen, I'm playing with my competitive teammates, and we're in 4v4. There are 4 killers on the enemy team. And if I kill somebody and I need to take space, I don't even need to tell my teammate to take that space. He already knows. Like, he already knows that position needs to be taken. And when I play public lobbies, or not public lobbies, Jesus Christ. When people can be like, oh, this guy's so comp. But when I play normal games of Battlefield, maybe it's my fault. I go into it with the same, not the same mindset, but I go into it understanding what's effective in gameplay. And when I kill a ton of people on the front line, and my team doesn't recognize that, and they don't move a muscle, it's like, fuck. Like, they're, because that's teamwork. Yeah. The act of recognizing space is now clear, we should take this space, is also teamwork.
Yeah.
It just, you don't get rewarded for it. There's no score for that. There's no accolade. It's a unheralded it's an unheralded aspect of actually understanding how to play Battlefield, right? There's a squad up front. They've cleared space. There are 20 people behind, not taking that space. Just imagine if even 10 of those people were right up on the enemies. The amount of pressure on that point. And that's what frustrates me so much about some Battlefield gameplay. It's like, I have no way to influence where these people are going to go right now. They could all fuck off and run into their spawn. Genuinely. Like, that's actually something they could do. they could go to the other point. I have no impact on their decision making, even though I know what the most impactful play will be right now.
I actually think, like, this is probably a good chance to talk about how, like, in some of the older Battlefield games, like, I never actually played Battlefield 2 as much as I've always wanted to go back and play it. But I know that there was, like, obviously the origin commander mode and, you know, all these different, like, teamwork mechanics. Personally, the way I think should be implemented is that if you're running in and capturing objectives, like, consistently and just wiping out players, that should mean you're delegated the squad commander role, right? Based on, like, performance. And then you can then you then are then put in a position to say, push. And I think that's where, like, obviously the Comoros kind of things comes in, where you should be able to say easily, we need to push this objective because I've cleared it, and so on. And I actually don't think Battlefield does a good enough job. I think it's become a lot more, it's almost become too casual in a sense that it doesn't encourage that anymore, really.
I think incentivizing, so you have the squad order system, you have these things that should incentivize a certain decision out of players, right? Your squad leader marks a flag. In theory, your squad understands we need to attack this flag. But that may work, and in some games it may not work, because it's one of those things where you can give players the tools to try to incentivize decision making and teamwork all you want. It's down to the player to actually understand what to do and to make those decisions. And I am not sure how you make more Battlefield players understand how to play or what to do in Battlefield. I don't know if you can, and I don't know if you should try to, because it's just one of those things. How do you make players play a certain way? How do you do that? It's kind of an impossibility.
Difficult. It's really hard. And, like, I think that's where, like, a lot of frustrations have come from, in terms of Battlefield growing bigger and bigger and bigger and less niche. Like, the more niche and the smaller contained a community is, especially when you look at, like, server browsers back in the day, you had, like, groups of players that were playing together constantly and did use a lot of teamwork. And I think when they then look at, like, the matchmaking and not seeing teamwork being used, that's where they get frustrated with, like, players like yourself as well, because you kind of represent that almost lone wolf style of aggressive gameplay from their perspective that is diminishing what they think Battlefield should be, which is, like, teamwork. And I think that's where if
I play with, but they would also say I'm destroying the game if I were to play with my teammates. You know, like, if I actually were to engage in heavy teamwork, they would say something else. So I don't know. I'm a skilled individual player that's trying to play the game. That's what I'm doing. And if I don't care if they call me a lone wolf, like
Yeah, I only use that because it's like, you know, it's an easily understandable concept of like you're the player kind of pushing the objective and aiming to get killed and stuff.
But
I don't necessarily think that that's not beneficial to teamwork, because it is, but it obviously does depend on whether your team has advantage of that. And we can just kind of at that point go all day about of what Battlefield is, and you know, we don't really get anywhere. But I'm still going to stick to my guns. I think you've done a really good job of enlightening me to the idea of why movement is important. Like those kind of movements are important to you. Personally, I still am happy with the quote unquote nerfs, because they feel more authentic to me, to how I actually view a weapon functioning, and like, you know, maybe they could implement it in a different way that would work better for everyone. But personally, the way I still stand, I think it's a good decision on their part. I don't think we're gonna agree on that one, but I do genuinely. I have enjoyed the conversation, and I do understand where you're coming from better than I did before we spoke.
As long as the movement in BF6 isn't totally destroyed and the options that are there are skillfully viable, then we don't have a problem.
Well, I guess part of the fun as well is going to be figuring out potentially new high skill ceiling options. Like, maybe because they've made these nerfs, there might be other things that you can figure out. I don't know. You know, you never know. That's going to be part of it, is basically figuring out what, you know, new viable mechanics to use.
All right.
But
I mean,
I don't know. We just have to wait and see.
I think that pretty much we've come to the end of it, I think.
I think so.
There it is. So we've butted heads on things, and maybe some understanding was gained.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's good. And by the way, Battlefield community, this is what we need to do. Looking at you, Reddit. Okay? So we need to do. So anyone else, step up to the plate. Sergeant Danger Cow, whoever wants to do it.
I'd encourage it. I mean, I would encourage anyone who has a deeper understanding of movement than me, but is also agrees with me, to debate you. I think that would be even more constructive. I'm coming at it purely as like a casual, like I fully admit that I'm a player. I think someone that is higher profile and puts a lot more time, but also agrees with the movement nerfs, should debate you next. I think that's what needs to happen.
I don't know
Finding
if
that person might be more difficult.
Does that exist? Is there a person that...
There's gotta be someone.
We'll have to find an individual that holds these beliefs, but I don't know. Get X Factor. Yeah, right. Dude, don't even get me started. Anyway, that pretty much does it. So thank you again, Allfather, for sticking on the debate here.
Thanks for inviting me. It's been enjoyable. I think it's I think it's constructive. I think even if we still don't agree, I still think it's been good to get it out there.
Absolutely. So all of Allfather's links will be in the description. This has been another episode of the Battlefield podcast. I think it's episode 8. If you enjoyed it, subscribe, hit the like button, let us know your thoughts. I'm sure the comments on here will be very spicy, and I will see you guys. We'll see you guys in the next iteration of the Battlefield podcast.
Bye.
And that's where we end it. All right. I'll see you later.
See ya.
Bye-bye. Okay. I completely disagree. I understand his point. I just think... No. I feel like you're looking at if you're approaching Battlefield with immersion and realism and authenticity as your baseline understanding, and you're going to apply that to everything. I feel like you don't understand what Battlefield is right now. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I don't know. It's very interesting. How did you feel that went? How did you feel that went?
Ready for orders.
I felt like I made some very good points. Like, I felt like I made some points that are pretty bulletproof, to be honest with you. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I had some real gotcha moments there where I don't know. The teamwork conversation was interesting. I don't know if I necessarily... We'll pay attention. We'll see if teamwork happens here. I don't know. We'll see. We'll pay attention if teamwork fucking happens here.
It doesn't matter what points you make to these people because they are impervious to reason.
I think what I'm probably gonna do is I'm gonna cut some fluff out of there because I think we're going in circles for a little bit on some things. I'll cut some fluff out of it in the editing, and I'll make sure the flow makes sense. Wait a minute, are my alerts back? Hold on, do they actually fucking work now? My alerts actually back. Would be fascinating if they are. No. Okay, cool. Fantastic. Tell your squad you're going to flank cap D. Yeah? Okay. I mean, sure. If I get in a position where I can actually do that.
Threat sight on my position.
Need middle support. All right. Okay. Middle support. Here I come. Here I come. Now, where middle support? Where?
Enemy soldier marked right here.
Sir, yes, sir.
Marking threat.
Sure.
Southeast.
The way you're middle supporting is so tough. Dude, thanks, dude. Thank you, man. Sake. Guys, do I have to play this game? Guys, do I have to play this game? Guys, do I have to play this game? Guys. I would love to see his screen on that POV. Like, I really would. Because I don't understand how... I don't know. I just PP29 diff. He just has more bullets to shoot through the smoke, I guess. I don't know. Oh, this fucking video game is such a... an interesting... I feel like there were multiple no-regs there. I feel like there were multiple no-regs there. Charity says A. Do I believe him? Not really. Not yet, at least. There's an A flank. Is A burning? Should I spawn on A? I mean, this could be a total... see that guy. Thank you guys for all the resubs, by the way. It won't change a thing, Strike Actual. No matter how many people I talk to in a civil manner, nobody's gonna think of me in a different way, because people are drones. Game is so bad. I know.
Red mark! Target down! I'm reloading! Don't worry, I can help. Scratch that. Took one out!
Like, who put Sundance in the game is a conversation we need to fucking have. Who the fuck put this fucking character in this fucking game? Alright. That's as much 2042 gameplay as you get out of me tonight. Alright. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out. Appreciate it. See you guys tomorrow.